Summer can be such a tricky time for parents of differently wired kids. Finding ways to keep kids active and learning over the break, whether at home or on vacation, it can be hard. Fat Brain Toys is a family-run business that has been curating and creating quality toys, games, and gifts that both entertain and educate for more than 20 years. Almost all of Fat Brain's toys and games are screen-free, and what I love about them is they encourage kids to get creative and explore the world around them through open-ended play. I'm especially drawn to this really cool product called Mr. Bendy. It's a sturdy yet bendable figure with posable arms, legs, and eyes. It comes with wax bendy sticks that you can use to turn Mr. Bendy into really anything, an astronaut, a guitarist, a pirate. And you can play it as a game with the sand timer and game tokens, or you can set those aside and just engage in open-ended play to explore things like spatial reasoning, creativity, and observation skills. I think what I love most about Mr. Bendy is it offers an easy and fun way for parents to connect with and support their neurodivergent kids in exploring social and emotional learning. Also, you know that I love a mission-driven company. Well, Fat Brain Toys is made up of families who want to make life better for other families. It was founded out of the desire of two parents to provide better play experiences for their kids, so their aim is to support you in doing the same. Fat Brain is a new sponsor of Tilt Parenting, and they've put together a collection of toys for our families. Go to www.fatbraintoys.com/tilt to get 10% off all the items in the Tilt collection when you use the code TILT at checkout, and find out for yourself why Fat Brain Toys is a smarter way to play.
The classroom is a place where a lot of information is offered, whether that's lecture or whether that's books or readings or class discussions. But nobody is telling anyone how to get that information or how to use that information. And so to be empowered or to understand that you as the learner need to be empowered in order to get in there and access that information is so fundamentally important that the responsibility for learning is on the learner, not on the teacher anymore. And so how do we start to get kids to think that way? That if this material is being presented to me, I want it. How do I remove the barriers to go and get it without expecting people to do it for me?
I'm Debbie Reber, and welcome to Tilt Parenting, a podcast featuring interviews and conversations aimed at inspiring, informing, and supporting parents raising differently wired kids. If you have a child approaching their college years, this episode is packed with invaluable advice. I'm thrilled to have Dr. Perry LaRoque here to discuss what neurodivergent students need to successfully navigate college, and his book, Taking Flight: College for Students with Disabilities, Diverse Learners, and Their Families. Perry is the founder and president of Mansfield Hall, which provides comprehensive residential, academic, social, and independent living skill support for students who are going to college. He's also the co-founder of the College Steps program, a nonprofit with a mission of providing post-secondary education to students with developmental disabilities in various locations across the East Coast. So, what does a successful college experience actually mean? Well, Perry broke it down for us, emphasizing the importance of the core values of awareness, regulation, expression, and dynamic determination. Perry also highlighted the essential skills for independence at schools, such as frustration tolerance and the importance of seeking help when needed, and explored some of the unexpected challenges students might face, from managing dorm life to maintaining proper sleep hygiene. We also discussed the various resources available on most college campuses and how students can maximize these support services, and why meeting with professors can actually be a game changer for a struggling student, something I wish I had known back when I was a struggling student. We all know that our kids are way more than the grades they get at school, and this conversation is full of insights on how to approach the college experience more holistically. I hope you enjoy it. Hey, Perry, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Once again, after 380 episodes, this is a new topic for the show, which always makes me excited. So we have a lot to talk about today. Before we get into that, of course, I read your formal bio, but I always like for my guests to talk about themselves in their own words. Like, how would you describe what you do in the world, and connected to that, your personal why for doing it?
Yeah, sure. So I came from a long line of educators. My dad was a school psychologist. My mom's a preschool teacher. My brother was a school psychologist, and now he's a partner in the work I'm doing now. And just sort of always went down the path, or considered the path of education. And early on had made the decision that I was more interested in working with students with disabilities. and went to the University of Wisconsin to get my teaching degree. And there was just such more of a social justice bend on that education that I think I kind of came to education from, looking at access and making sure that all kids were able to get the education that was appropriate for them and what they needed. And it was really just sort of inspired more on the mission of making sure that we're serving all of our students regardless of disability. So I taught for a few years and then went back for my doctorate in education with a focus on students with disabilities, primarily because as a teacher, I think I was a good teacher. I probably was fun, but my mind was really focused more on what was holding our students back. And I started to feel like I was perpetuating the problems by participating in the system, and just really wanted to get involved in doing something to shake up the system and pave the way for these students with disabilities. And so as a college professor, I was a professor for about 7 years, just started to recognize this huge need for more services to support students with disabilities on the campus scale, and had started a couple other programs to sort of try to start to plug some of those holes. The College Steps program was a program that we had started and kind of focused more on students with intellectual disabilities at the time. And then another program called Think College, which was a grant with the University of Vermont, where we serve students with intellectual disabilities. But I was really still seeing this big gap of this student who presented themselves as someone who was bright, eager, excited about education, had the skills to do well in education. But what it boiled down to were all the things that were supporting them was where they were really tripping up in being able to pursue that education. And so we started Mansfield Hall in 2013 as a way for students who were neurodiverse to be able to attend college in a more typical way, but also receive all the services and supports that they would need sort of all under one roof to help them on their journey.
Mansfield Hall, that actually came up in a conversation I did with Dr. Eric Englick. We had a conversation about gap year programs and PG programs, and Mansfield Hall came up. So just for listeners who might not be familiar with it, could you explain the model of that and how it works?
Yeah, sure. And Eric is a great educational consultant, so I'll give him another pitch, and he's been really helpful to us in a lot of different ways. So Mansfield Hall is a residential college support program for students who we could say on the spectrum or neurodiverse students. So students who have difficulties with social skills, but have the college capabilities to pass traditional courses. We kind of think of ourselves as like a super dorm. We've got locations in Burlington, Vermont, Madison, Wisconsin, and Eugene, Oregon. And so they're intentionally on big university campuses because we want the students to be able to benefit from that campus participation. But then all of those towns also have a variety of different colleges. In Burlington, Vermont, we have University of Vermont, Champlain College, and the Community College of Vermont. So our students sort of come to us first, and then we kind of help them figure out what college path makes the most sense. And sometimes it's going to the community college first and then transitioning to a different college. And sometimes it's going to the big college first and then realizing it's not necessarily suiting their needs and then moving them on to the community college. And so students stay with us for like 1 to 2 years residentially. And then they move into our Connections program, which is a non-residential program where they still get the services and supports, but it's done in their dorms or their apartments. And then we just kind of are along on their journey and hopefully passing off our support to them so that they can continue to self-advocate and move forward in life, being able to have the skills they needed to be successful.
Such a cool model. Listeners, I'll have links to that in the show notes page as well, to Mansfield Hall and to my conversation with Eric. So definitely go check that out. But what I want to talk about today then is your book. It's called Taking Flight, The Guide to College for Diverse Learners and Non-Traditional Students. And I think of it as kind of like the handbook for students to navigate all the complexities of university. You describe it as a book about how to have a successful college experience, but that's not good grades. And so I would love to know how you would define a successful college experience. Like, what does that mean to you?
Yeah. So, I think that the focus oftentimes on college is about just class. And still to this day, when I meet with families, they're very heavily focused on doing well in classes and how are their students going to study. It's very study focused, right? What are they going to do to learn? Which obviously is incredibly important. But I think that what people don't realize is that there are so many soft skills that are there to help learning or to militate against learning, that we sometimes forget to see what are those pieces that in someone's life that can be holding them back or propelling them forward. And so at Mansfield Hall, and the book is sort of set up in a similar way to the way I created Mansfield Hall. And that is that to have this successful college experience, you've got to look at like, what does a successful college student look like? And so we sort of put those into 4 different areas, and that's learning, living, giving, and engaging. And so the learning is the stuff that the parents are worried about and students are worried about. And that is like doing well in classes. And that's just one part of the wheel. The engaging part is, how do you get actively involved on campus? How do you make new friends? How do you get involved in clubs and activities? And how do you find your tribe on campus? The independent living, the living section, thinking about how does somebody grow in their independent living skills, whether that's sleep hygiene or managing their schedule or a work-life balance. How do they deal with conflict? I mean, all those pieces that we sort of take for granted that we learn throughout college. It's also, we have to recognize that we do learn those things, and sometimes they just need to be more explicitly taught. And then finally, this giving back. So how are we giving back to our communities through volunteering and internships and job-related skills? So really, that's the vocational piece, but it's also the perspective-taking piece. And so if you look at like these people who are graduating college at the top of their class, they have all 4 of those areas. You know, those are well-tuned and good balance. They're volunteering. They're doing some level of employment potentially. They're active on campus. They're learning to live as young adults independently. They're passing their courses. And really all of those different pieces really do prop one another up. I mean, you can imagine someone being the smartest person in the world, and if they're not managing their sleep hygiene very well, or they're having roommate conflicts or boyfriend-girlfriend conflicts that are detracting from their learning, it's not about what they know, it's about how they can use that or how they can learn it. And so coming from a perspective of just like studying and study skills, I think misses a much bigger picture of what it takes to be successful in college.
Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting reading your book. First of all, reflecting on my own college experience, I didn't have most of these skills. I don't know how I got by in high school, but when I got to college, I was young. I had none of this experience and it was messy. But there are so many pieces. And now, about to send my kid off to university. These are all, I was like, oh my gosh, there's a lot to be thinking about. There's a quote that jumped out at me. It says, you're talking about that colleges aren't a place of teaching, but an institution of learning. And that learning is dictated by willingness, interest, and desire, not by intelligence, test scores, or traditional learning characteristics. It should be a place where students have fertile opportunities to learn. And you say that this will require your commitment to not only prove that college is for you, but also require you to work from within, assertively pushing that system to remain nimble and responsive. So I just thought that was so interesting that really you're taking to task or encouraging students to be the change that the universities need. Could you talk about that a little bit?
So first off, the idea is that we're oftentimes focused, especially we're coming from like high schools or secondary schools where the focus is on teaching, because as a parent, you're sending your kid to school. You want the teachers to teach them. If your kid's acting like a jerk, you want their teachers to fix it, and you're going to fix it and you're going to teach them to learn. College is just a 180-degree switch. I mean, we're seeing some improvements, but for the most part, professors aren't trained how to teach. At bigger universities, they're very interested in their research. Some of them might take it as, an interest in brushing up on their teaching skills, but it's really not the requirement. It's only maybe 1/3 to 1/4 of their evaluations if they're not already tenured. The classroom is a place where a lot of information is offered, whether that's lecture or whether that's books or readings or class discussions. But nobody is telling anyone how to get that information or how to use that information. And so to be empowered or to understand that you as the learner need to be empowered in order to get in there and access that information is so fundamentally important that the responsibility for learning is on the learner, not on the teacher anymore. And so how do we start to get kids to think that way? That if this material is being presented to me, I want it. How do I remove the barriers to go and get it without expecting people to do it for me? And I just did a talk with a bunch of parents just recently. And I said, the problem with parents only advocating for their children through high school is that the kids are kind of left without those really important skills. And at some point, the job of a parent is over and we can scream and yell and do everything we want to try to change some of these systems. But really what we have to do is be focused on this generation of students with disabilities and diverse learning needs coming up to sort of be the change they want to see in the world, that they've got to go in there and advocate for the things that they need, to advocate for changes in the university. And that doesn't mean make it easier. It just means make it more accessible for diverse thinking. And so I think that that's sort of the central theme of the book overall, is not like, here are some skills that you need to go out and do. It's more about like, you need to start to understand yourself in order for you to be able to go out and advocate for yourself.
Yeah, it was so interesting. We're going to get into the concepts in your book more, but I just have one other kind of adjacent question. And that is, I just read an article, I don't remember if it was in the Atlantic or New York or something like this, about these robust Facebook groups that are bringing together parents from different colleges. And they are talking about everything from how to access services to, my kid has a test, I can't reach them, they asked me to wake them up. Can someone go knock on their dorm door? So there's a lot kind of like helicopter parenting, for lack of a better word. I'm just wondering, I'd love to know your thoughts on that level of parental involvement, because I think parents of neurodivergent students are used to playing a bigger role with the scaffolding of executive function. And so I'd just love to know your thoughts on that separation.
In that talk I did recently, one of the parents said, well, my daughter, she's in middle school and she's just not ready for any of this. And I said, no, of course she's not. But the idea is that everything that you're doing as a parent right now should get her to the place when she's 18 to be able to do it by herself. Like, that's your job, is to make sure she's ready for that. I think parents, especially in the United States special education system, and I think I talk about this in the book as well, but if you look at just like how much support a student is receiving if they have special education services, and that's mandated support. And so you might have 6 people or more on your IEP team just alone. And those are people who the kid has been told, these are your team, they're going to work with you, the speech and language and OT and special ed and, you name it, they're on this IEP. And then you go to college, and college is governed by 504 and ADA. And so there is no mandated services and supports that a student's going to receive in their college education. And so that team, suddenly the student has to put together themselves. And most colleges won't speak with parents on the phone. And most professors aren't going to talk to a mom on the phone. They're going to want to talk to that student. And so the power suddenly shifts entirely to that child. And we can continue to be the advocates for our children, and we continue to get involved when it makes sense. But we also need to be the coaches for them to make sure that they're out there doing it for themselves first. Because one, it's more effective. You're teaching them more important skills than they're learning in class by teaching them how to advocate for themselves. And it lands better when a student can come and say, this is how this is impacting me, and I want to advocate for something different. Then we can get involved when the university starts to say no, or we start to feel like there's some injustice happening, and then we can start to be more active. But on that initial level, it's like, if a student can't wake themselves up in the morning, what kind of skill are they going to have for a job later? And I get that moms and dads want to wake their kids up for school on time, but those are skills they should have been working on when they were freshmen in high school, not when they were freshmen in college.
Yeah. And I want to talk about the fact that you have a chapter in your book that made me laugh called Nobody is Going to Wake You Up. That was the name of the chapter. And that really resonated for me. Yeah. But let's take a quick break and then we'll get into some of the concepts in your book. There are a lot of moving pieces and big transitions happening in my world, and I'm finding myself really relying on my routines these days. Because when there are so many changes happening that are beyond my control, consistency in a few aspects of my life has been absolutely critical. That's one of the reasons why I like Ritual's Symbiotic Plus, a 3-in-1 supplement with clinically studied prebiotics, probiotics, and a postbiotic to support a balanced gut microbiome, as it's become a regular part of my morning routine. One minty capsule first thing while sitting down with my laptop, and I can get on with my day knowing that I'm doing something just for me and my well-being. And the capsule itself is a delayed release, which helps it survive the harsh conditions of the upper GI tract for delivery to the colon, which is exactly where we want it to go. But there's a lot more I like about Ritual too. As a company, they're committed to sustainability, using scientific tools to select lower carbon packaging, prioritize sustainably sourced ingredients, and set ambitious climate goals. And they're a female-founded B Corp, meaning they are holding themselves accountable long-term to not only think about their company's financial health, but also the health of people and our planet. I love all of that. There's no more shame in your gut game. Symbiotic Plus and Ritual are here to celebrate, not hide your insides. Get 25% off your first month for a limited time at ritual.com/tilt. Start Ritual or add Symbiotic Plus to your subscription today. That's ritual.com/tilt for 25% off. As a longtime runner, hydration is something I've always had to consider, especially in the hot, humid summers of New York. But staying hydrated is important for everyone, and it's not just about drinking water. Being optimally hydrated means optimizing your body's fluid ratios, including electrolytes. In fact, electrolyte deficiency or imbalance can cause headaches, cramps, fatigue, brain fog, and weakness. Element is a zero-sugar electrolyte drink mix designed for better hydration. Each pack provides a strong dose of electrolytes without any sugar or artificial colors or any other dodgy ingredients. And while Element is found in an enthusiastic community in everyone from Olympic athletes to special forces to functional nutrition experts, it's also perfect for moms, your everyday exercise enthusiasts like me, folks who are fasting or those following keto, low-carb, whole food diets, really anyone on a mission to restore health through hydration. Element's formula was created with a science-backed electrolyte ratio of sodium, potassium, and magnesium. And again, no sugar. And because I'm a researcher, I wanted to better understand the benefits of having optimal electrolyte levels. And there are so many, including reducing muscle cramps, promoting better sleep, and supporting better digestion, just to name a few. Get your free Element sample pack with any purchase at drinklmnt.com/tilt. Also, try the new Element Sparkling, a bold 16-ounce can of sparkling electrolyte water.
This is the moment.
The Bachelorette is back. Yeah! And the power
I'm gonna fall in love.
is in Jen's hands.
And I'm gonna do it my way.
ABC tonight.
Everything about her is great.
I feel so special.
Jen's looking like a queen.
My men are very, very hot.
Someone call 911. You are looking so fire.
This is the beginning of a new era.
The Bachelorette season premiere tonight, 8/7 Central on ABC and stream on Hulu.
Okay, so I do want to talk about the sleep situation, but before I do that, earlier on in the book, you shared 4 values that students can adopt and apply that you say will help them be successful in college and in life. Those were awareness, regulation, expression, and dynamic determination. Could you give us kind of an overview?
I think that identity and expression, that is kind of what's happening in college, especially for students with disabilities. They come to the world with such a different lens. And you just went through high school and elementary school where like the skills that you have are not the skills that are promoted in school necessarily. And so you're immediately going through a system where every day there's some level of frustration where some kids really enjoy school and really do well at it. It's a struggle for kids with disabilities or even just diverse learners. And so, I mean, I think that when they're coming into college, that sense of how do I express myself or who am I as a person is something that we can all relate to when we went to college. Like, I think I talked about it in the book, but like, what t-shirt are you going to wear on the first day in college? And you see the kids all pick what t-shirt, and they all thought about it. They might be like, oh, I don't care what t-shirt I wear. It's like, of course you did, even if it was a dirty one, you did it on purpose. And so how do you start to understand who you are as an individual with all of your great characteristics and all of your challenges combined? Because that's what everybody else is dealing with. And so I think that's obviously really important. The dynamic determination piece, and this is probably not what I can explain in a short period of time, but the idea is that self-determination, people often misunderstand it for being, this is what I want to do in life. And so now I'm just going to go do that. And so it's like, oh, I want to be a dentist. I'm going to be a dentist. And like, that's not how it works for anybody, disability or not. And so it's about understanding yourself and understanding the things that you want to do, your interest areas, your self-efficacy. Am I able to do those things? And then listening to the people around you, not necessarily because they are always right, but because they give you a perspective that you then need to incorporate within yourself. So I think training students to kind of think about that process, learn those self-determination skills that are there is more important than like someone choosing a career path necessarily. We all choose career paths and then we change them anyway. So why do we emphasize that so much for kids? It's like, let's emphasize the ability to adjust to what you want to do in life and be flexible around that. Regulation, I think that this is the other area like that college is hard. And I don't think that people realize how much that like your ability to withstand frustration, that frustration tolerance is like so fundamentally important. I feel like those are those pieces that we don't give enough students enough skills. Right now, we are seeing a huge increase in mental health, whether it's the pandemic or not. We're also seeing a lot of students who don't know what to do about it. And so it's like being able to understand that I have a lot of anxiety is great. Like that's the first step. Like that's the awareness piece that I'll talk about next. But like what to do about it, I think is the more important piece of like, how do I actually get that support that I need? And so really pushing those skills. And then finally, that awareness piece is just, we can't make decisions unless we can fully understand not only a lot about ourselves, understanding our strengths and weaknesses, but also understanding the environment around us. And so one of the things that one of my colleagues always says is there's only 3 questions that should be asked on a college entrance exam. And that is, do you know when you're struggling? Do you know where to get help? And then do you know how to use the help on an ongoing basis? And that's that awareness piece. It's like you're going into college. You need to understand what your weaknesses are. You need to understand what your strengths are. You need to know where to go and get help. You need to know how to use that help. Those are the skills that are way more important than just being a good writer. You can be a terrible writer and do well in college if you know where to go get writing support.
That's so great. Yeah, there was a quote about awareness that jumped out at me. You said, here's the tricky thing with awareness. If you lack awareness, it's going to be difficult to be aware enough to know that you lack awareness.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. It's the catch-22 there, right? Yeah. And, I think that we're all self-aware to some extent, but I recently talked about like looking in a mirror for somebody. It's like you see who you are, but you don't know how you're perceived by other people. And so this like, even as adults, we're constantly trying to figure out exactly who we are. And I think that that is just something that we should encourage people to think about, especially when people are trying to like figure out some of these weaknesses that have been promoted in their lives so much. How do those fit into my life? Like, how does, do I identify as someone with a disability? Do I not identify as someone with a disability? I just identify as an artist that has some unique challenges. Like, having kids explore that early on is better because otherwise they come up with this deficit perspective, I am my disability, which I think is really damaging.
So let's pivot back to the sleep situation. So again, you have the chapter called Nobody is Going to Wake You Up. And that is true. In a traditional college, no one's going to be like knocking on your door. You've got a 9 o'clock class. Make sure that you get there. And so that to me is just one of the things, even thinking about living in a dorm, right? There are so many, you talk about the roommate situation. I'm wondering, in your experience, what are some of the things that neurodivergent students going to university are kind of surprised is an issue, something that they hadn't thought about before when it comes to their living environment or dorm life?
Yeah. One of the biggest areas is probably just the amount of relationships that they have to navigate right off the bat. I think that that's a huge challenge, especially with people all living in this, potentially in the same dorm. And so I think that that's oftentimes when I'm talking to families who are thinking about sending their neurodiverse student to college, that's the question of like, well, what about the roommate situation? And I think we're getting to a better place where, a student who has autism can land in the college dorm room with someone without autism, and we can all be accepting of that. But I also think there's some reality that we're not entirely there yet. And so pre-thinking about some of those things, whether you get a single or whether you're able to be at a college with a living and learning dorm, like at the University of Vermont, where more neurodivergent students are living, that is, I think, really challenging for students. I mean, the other one is just managing the schedule. You said you had Eric on to talk about some of these skills of like, how are we going to start managing our own calendars? Like, how are we going to start to do some of these pieces? And these gap year programs, I really do think the rush to college in the US, I think, is not wise, disability or no disability, because there are some skills like waking up in the morning that are very important. And if a student doesn't have them down yet and they're not willing to address them on their own and manage it on their own, it's really can be a tough year. And so the title of that chapter is kind of tongue in cheek, but it is reality. Oftentimes people say, what's the most difficult thing you do at Mansfield Hall? We say, well, waking people up is really challenging. We're teaching our students those skills, and, mom and dad will, why can't you wake them up? You're like, why couldn't you wake them up? It is one of those pieces where we have to start getting students the habits and the routines to be able to do it on their own. Because if they can't do the rest of the day. On that analogy, you can go through the whole day. I mean, if they can't, manage their calendar, to time management skills, to manage their classes and their studying and their all those different pieces, to do college in that first year and take all these high level courses, but then also to manage college in that first year, for most people is overwhelming. You add a disability to that, and in some ways it becomes almost impossible for some students. And so if they don't have those skills to support learning before they get to college, it's kind of putting them in unfair situations.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, one of the things that Eric said that really has stuck with me is the difference between being college capable and college ready. It's like, oh yeah, that is a very big distinction. Let's take a quick break, and then I want to talk about some of the resources that students should be aware of when they go to university and take advantage of. Hey there, it's Debbie. I love making this show and sharing conversations about how to support our awesome neurodivergent kids. I've seen how even one little insight from an interview can spark a big shift in daily life. But I know that raising complex kids can be messy and lonely. And just when we think we figured it out, something comes up that boots us right back to feeling overwhelmed and stuck. That's why I've poured everything into creating a way for parents like us navigating complex parenting journeys to join together and chart a path that feels positive, hopeful, and doable. It's the brand new Differently Wired Club experience. In the club, you'll get personal support from me and other seasoned parent coaches, 6 live calls every month where you can connect and get your personal questions answered, the opportunity to learn directly from authors and experts like I have on this show, monthly themes for getting specific and tactical, an exclusive private podcast feed, and the best, most generous community of parents. Seriously, these folks show up for themselves and each other, and that right there is really everything, because it's a daily reminder that we're not alone. Our kids aren't broken, and we have totally got this. The recently rebooted Differently Wired Club is on a brand new platform with its very own iOS and Android app. It is such a great space. However you learn, whatever your style, no matter the ages, genders, and neurodivergent profile of your children, the Differently Wired Club can help you cultivate the positive shifts you're hoping for. Join us today by going to tiltparenting.com/club. That's tiltparenting.com/club. I hope to see you on the inside.
Lynn, this time of year, parenting can be such a flusterclux.
You've come to the right place. I'm Lynn Lyons, and I've been treating anxious families for over 30 years.
I'm Lynn's sister-in-law and co-host Robin Hudson.
Join us for Flusterclux, a podcast for parents who worry.
Wait, that's everybody.
Yeah, these last few years have felt like one long anxiety attack for so many.
Why do you think parents are always surprised that a podcast about anxiety relates to them, even if no one in their house has an anxiety disorder?
Well, worry is human. Everyone does it, and anxiety shows up when we face uncertainty.
All the parenting tips you've taught me have been essential.
I love to break it down into skills we need to manage worry in our families.
We've covered so many topics: depression, burnout, meltdowns, perfectionism.
Don't forget scary mothers-in-law.
Right, but of course that's not my mother-in-law.
Because that's my mother.
And a listener.
As a psychotherapist, I like to teach parents and kids how to respond to everyday moments in healthy ways.
Managing anxiety really can be taught.
It really can. And I'll even tell you what to say.
We talk about serious stuff, but without being too serious.
Anxiety wants everything serious. Anxiety doesn't stand a chance when we're laughing, even about the tough stuff.
Hey, are you a parent of a teenager? Are you feeling overwhelmed about how to be what they need while also holding limits and boundaries that keep them safe? Are you tired of conversations that negate how messy this season of parenting is? Well, I've got you. My name is Casey O'Rourke. I am a positive discipline trainer, parent coach, and the host of the Joyful Courage podcast. Every week, I come to you with an interview digging into tough topics with experts I trust and solo shows that go deep into the personal growth and mindset needed to raise teens in a way that grows them into confident, capable young people. I am not afraid of getting real about the intersection of conscious parenting and the teen years, while also bringing in vulnerability, humor, and lightness. I'm walking the path with you and honored to serve. Listen to Joyful Courage on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you consume podcasts.
You have a chapter on all the resources students should know about when they go to university. I'll just say I went to Penn State. I mean, that's a huge school. And I was like a runner. I was very much a social person. The academics, I really don't remember, to be honest. And I'm certain I didn't take advantage of any of these kinds of services. But now, having toured a bunch of schools with my kiddo, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a writing center? Like, they'll help you with writing? That's amazing. I'm wondering if you could share what you think are some of the more important resources that most universities have that neurodivergent students should not only know about, but take advantage of.
Yeah, I think there's some standard ones, and I'll come back. But I think there's the writing centers, people have math labs, people have study groups, there are counseling centers, there's disability services. Some coaches will have like coaches or coach mentors. Universities will have that. There's a wide range of them. And I think, first of all, knowing what's available at the college that you pick is incredibly important, right? Because, on day one, we need to know what's there. So at Mansfield Hall, I'll give you an example that one of the jobs that we do to make a student independent in college or to help them become independent in college is to make sure that they know how to utilize all those resources. Generally, most of our students end up finishing college without our support. I mean, most of our students finish college without our support. And that's because they were able to actually figure out how to use the campus support. And so that should tell you something. It's like if people knew how to use all those services on day one, then I think they would do really well. But oftentimes they're on different parts of the campus. There's a huge amount of anxiety and nervousness to go in through those doors. We're not necessarily sure how to do it. No one's introduced us the first time. Keep in mind, in high school, if you needed more writing support, the teacher told you to stay in a recess for more writing support. You actually have to get out of your bed and go and find that support and use that support and come back to use that support. And so I think one is knowing what's there. The other is that I've just felt like if students could just use all of it right off the bat, then their life would be easier. And I don't know how we've gotten to this place in the world where it's like that kind of support for people who is struggling. It's like that support, if you're not struggling, should make your life easier. And so if people can go in and start writing their papers with the writing center and learn different techniques of doing it and being able to have someone help them review their papers and, revise them together, it's going to be easier to write the next paper. And eventually you might not need that writing center, but at least it's always going to be a resource. It's like, I feel like people go to those things when it's too late. I started going to the writing center because I failed 5 papers. It's like, well, you probably should have gone to the writing center when you were struggling with your first paper, not failed it. And so really encouraging people to really understand what those services and supports are and then use them. The other pieces I'll just say is that I think the most unfortunate thing about college is that they're not required to provide support. They're required to provide accommodations in class, and that's it. There's nothing more they have to do. And that's only if you identify yourself as having a disability. And so parents and students also need to think about what else they might need beyond the campus level of support. And I often tell people the first place to start is a really good coach. I think a really good, sometimes they're called ADHD coaches or executive functioning coaches or academic coaches, whatever it is, or programs that have coaching involved with them. I think that that's really important because that person is sort of like your tour guide to help you understand these things and help you build those self-awareness skills. And it's probably step one is to get that coach if you think that student needs a little bit more. And then there's a whole plethora of options all the way up to Mansfield Hall after that if a student really needs a lot more wraparound services. But no matter what the college is saying, there are a lot of good programs around the country right now that are serving students with disabilities, but most of them won't follow you out the door and most of them won't wake you up. And so that's, again, those are those big challenges that students can have. They still have to go and access that support. And so just being really smart about, okay, we can always remove the support, right? That's best practice. Let's start with the support and let's titrate it over time. It's a lot harder to get a student out of a mess. And I'll tell you, students who fail out that first semester or that first year, it is not the way you want someone to start their college career, right? You want them to start with some success and excitement. Most of our students start with 2 to 3 classes max their first year because we want them to ease into it and add more classes if they're learning how to do it. But students who come to us after failing out after a year, their level of confidence and they're looking down on the whole system, it's hard to pull them out of that. And so it's like, how do we set them up for success in that first year?
That makes total sense. And just to circle back to the Writing Center, there was a quote that I loved about that. You said, you must use the Writing Center. Writing centers are not there for bad writers. Writing centers are there for people who want to be excellent writers. And that was just such a nice reframe because, a lot of people wait until it's too late? And why not take advantage of all of those services and supports from the very beginning?
Well, I think I mentioned in there too, I'm like, don't think that your professors aren't getting their papers edited. I mean, like, there's not a professor on all of campus that doesn't finish a paper and then either pays for someone to professionally edit or ask another colleague to do it. Like, there's just, everyone has that support in writing. And I've known a lot of professors who are terrible at writing and they know it. They're in a job where writing is one of the most important things that they do. They've just gotten all the supports and all the systems and all the things in place in order to help them overcome that obstacle. And so, again, I think because writing is such a crucial piece, that the writing center, there should be lines at the door at those writing centers, and there typically aren't.
Yeah, interesting. So you mentioned professors, and you do talk a lot about the importance of students meeting with their professors. So could you talk about why it's so important for students to meet with their professors, and what are some of the things they can communicate about?
Yeah, the original title of the book at one point, I think, was going to be like The Insider's Guide to College. It was supposed to be like as my life as a professor. And there are just these things that good students do. And I would tell you that a lot of times non-traditional, just to make more sense for people on that, non-traditional students are students who are their first generation college students who are at a significant disadvantage in college because they don't have a mom or dad who can say, oh, just go talk to your professor or do some of these skills. So keep in mind that a lot of this book is also trying to like level the playing field for students who are coming into college without the sort of resources that someone else might have. And I think that piece around making sure that your professor knows that you care, making sure that they're aware that you're there, that you're understanding that you want to excel in the class actually makes a big difference. And we like to think grades are scientific, but they really aren't that scientific. There are certainly professors who are between the C- and the D+. They were in my office hours. They tried really hard. I'm going to bump them up. Like, right. I think I even call it the bump up. And so, that is something that I think other students know that they can advocate for, like the hidden rules of college, right? Like every professor who tells you that there are no makeup assignments, extra credit, or you can't turn in late assignments, like there's an asterisk after that. It's an invisible asterisk. That means unless you ask really nicely and have a really good reason. And so at the very least, advocating for yourself, going into your professor and saying, oh, I really blew up that exam. Like, can we talk? Is there anything I can be doing? Can I do a makeup exam? Asking all those questions not only shows interest, but there are other students in that class, I guarantee you, who have gone in and negotiated some way to get some points back on that exam or have the professor be a little bit more lenient. And it's not going to work in every case, but being involved in your education and understanding these professors are there to provide what they know, and professors to know that you're there because you care and you want to learn goes a very long way with faculty.
That's such great insight. There's so much of that in this book. I just want to say we can't obviously get into it all, but you really do cover all the bases in terms of the things that students should know about, how to get comfortable advocating for themselves when they need to escalate something up the food chain if they're not getting the supports that they have arranged with the school. So much in there, how to navigate the social lives. As a way to wrap up, I'd love to know how you hope students use your book. Do you see it as something you hope they read ahead of time, that they bring with them to school and use as a reference, both?
I hope that they read it, or at least I hope their moms or dads read it and understand what their journey is going to become, and then nag them to read it throughout the next couple of years, right? The book was written to students because they have to do it. When I was first talking to the publisher, they really would have preferred it if I would have been addressing the parents, and it's just against my grain to do something like that because it's not the parents that are going to be doing this, it's the students. And if a parent needs to read this over their kids' shoulders and understand what they can do to help promote them as these, lifelong learners, I think it's great. But at the end of the day, it's a lot more than just checking boxes and knowing that if I study this way, then I'm going to be just fine. It's also knowing who you are as a person and knowing that your disability doesn't define you, that you've got a whole bunch of amazing strengths, and that anything is possible if you just put your mind to it. I think that students need to hear that. We live in such a world where students are being defined by their disability and being told that they can't do things, that they're coming into a situation where they might not have that same level of tenacity that somebody else might. And really what they need throughout college is just an undying desire to get it done. And I try to use some stories in there just to talk about like, hey, college doesn't necessarily look like 4 years and then graduation for most people. College sometimes is 6, 7, 8 years. And it's just about like finding the right path for you and not getting frustrated and understanding that every new failure is just new information about yourself and working harder and going in the direction that you want to go in. And so I think if anything, from the book, I want people to be inspired that they are capable and are able to do great things if they put their minds to it more than anything else. And even if that doesn't mean going to college, even if it just means that like, I'm going to go out and attack the world with this sense of like empowerment, I think that that's what I would want them to take away from it.
Thank you. What a great note to end this on. So listeners, the book is called Taking Flight, The Guide to College for Diverse Learners and Non-Traditional Students. And Perry, is there a place that you want listeners to go to online, social media to check you out?
Anywhere you buy books, and Amazon, feel free to buy wherever it's easiest for you.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for this conversation and providing just such a generous and helpful resource for our kiddos. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
You've been listening to the Tilt Parenting Podcast. To learn more about today's guest and the resources we talked about, check out the extensive show notes page on Tilt Parenting. There you'll find key takeaways, links to all the resources mentioned, and even a full transcript of our conversation. Just go to tiltparenting.com/podcast and select this episode. If you're looking for personal support from me and connection with the phenomenal community of parents raising neurodivergent kids, join us in the recently rebooted Differently Wired Club. The new Differently Wired Club can help you cultivate the positive shifts you're hoping for. Go to tiltparenting.com/club to learn more. The Tilt Parenting Podcast is hosted by me, Debbie Reber, author of Differently Wired and the founder of Tilt Parenting, and was edited by Andrea Curtis Amasquita. To support this show, please join my Patreon campaign where you can set up a small monthly contribution. Just go to patreon.com/tiltparenting to learn more. If you want to follow Tilt on social media, you can find us at Tilt Parenting on Instagram and Facebook. And lastly, please take a minute to leave a 5-star rating or review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. That helps this show stay visible so others can find it more easily. And that's all for this week. Stay safe, stay well, and take good care. And for more information about any of the parenting resources Tilt offers, visit tiltparenting.com.
If you're a parent, I invite you to join us at the Mindful Mama podcast, where it's all about becoming a less irritable, more joyful parent. With sometimes hilarious and always thought-provoking experts and friends, at Mindful Mama, we know that you cannot give what you do not have. And when you have calm and peace within, then you can give it to your children. I'm Hunter Clark Fields, and I can't wait to see you there. Listen in to the Mindful Mama podcast.